in this conversation. Yeah.
I guess
Shall we?
as always, you could just say, welcome to Through the Window, blah, blah, blah,
Evet.
Turkish translation. But then, and then I'll,
Is there any people waiting, 𝘕𝘰𝘶?
always, you could
So,
just say, welcome to Through the Window,
And go.
blah, blah, blah,
Evet.
Turkish translation.
Yeah,
And then I'll hear myself.
Can start to take them in.
I think we can start taking them in, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Okay, is everybody ready?
Yeah.
ready.
Yeah, I brushed my teeth, even though you can't smell it. I just want you to know that
I have
will
that
see.
same exact, I'm always so obnoxious about my teeth. I brush them way too much. I don't think it's actually healthy to brush your teeth all the time, because at some point it kind of like breaks. I don't know what the surface thingy is called, but it breaks it and it's not healthy. And my doctor once told me that you brush your teeth too much and you should not be doing that. So I don't know about that.
We already have 28 people here. Hello.
Hi.
Hoş geldiniz. Hello,
Hello.
everyone.
Hi.
Hi, hi.
Hi.
Hello, Saskia.
I can see
Hello,
so many of
Lalo.
my friends here.
I will be short here because I have to go to the encampment at the university. It
Ah,
started
very good.
today. Yeah.
Is that the encampment in Eindhoven? Oh, wow. So there's one in Eindhoven too. That's amazing.
Are
Saskia,
you German?
Eindhoven.
Oh, I see Ahmed. Mallah.
Simon, are you German?
No, I'm Dutch.
Because the way you pronounce what you just said, what was the name? You pronounced it in such a German accent.
Oh yeah. Eindhoven. Sorry, I did not mean to scare anybody like that. No, Saskia works at the University of Eindhoven.
I was with 4 of my German friends yesterday and they were all like dancing in front of me. I was like, wow, the apartheid wall is in front of me.
But it's great to hear. So Saskia teaches at the University of Eindhoven, so it's great to hear that
it's Spontis, but it is in Eindhoven, yes.
Yeah, okay, sorry.
Shall we start slowly, darling? Yeah?
Yeah, oh, Hanin is here, okay.
Yeah.
Lalo is here.
Hi, Lalo.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
𝘕𝘰𝘶.
Friends here.
Hello, 𝘕𝘰𝘶. 𝘕𝘰𝘶 is in Ankara now. And Robbie, hi, darling.
Hello, hello, everyone. Hi, Simon. Hi, 𝘬𝘰𝘶.
Hello.
Yes. Simon, would you like to start, darling?
Yes, let's do it, darling.
Yeah.
Did you want to say something, 𝘬𝘰𝘶? Did you want to say hello to everyone?
Hello, everyone. İyi akşamlar herkese. Hoş geldiniz. And welcome to our first gathering in our 5th iteration. I'm 𝘬𝘰𝘶. We will have English to Turkish translation. İngilizceden Türkçe translation'ımız olacak. Aşağıdaki tercüme butonundan erişebilirsiniz Türkçe tercümeye diyorum. And now the mic is on you, Simon. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, my darling 𝘬𝘰𝘶, and also 𝘕𝘰𝘶, who's here. Welcome to Through the Window. Indeed, it is our 5th iteration. This time we have called it Through the Window Sees Fire, coming from a song from 𝘗𝘢𝘭 𝘬𝘀𝑚. And of course, we wanted our Through the Window to be in solidarity with Palestinian liberation. And that's why we're gathering today, which is 2 days before Nakba, or the annual commemoration of Nakba. And of course, that's, just a moment in time, because we are constantly in this current moment commemorating and also actively looking towards the future, right? And I think many of the speakers today will also share what it means to suddenly have, for example, Through the Window be in solidarity with Palestinian liberation, and why this wasn't, for example, last year, right? There's a strange distribution of attention there. So I just want to point it out. My name is indeed Simon. You might know me from previous Through the Window iterations, and if not, then welcome. Today we have three amazing speakers. We have Anine Mekki, we have Nihal Rabani, and we have Noor. And they will share with us their practice. They will share with us the kind of activism that they have been involved with and in for many years. And basically how it will go is that they will each give a short presentation, and after that they will enter into conversation, and there is also space for you to ask questions in the chat or by voice. So you can do that. You can also, put it in the chat as soon as you have a question, because we can look at those later. I am currently zooming in from my morning in Oakland, California, also known as the land of the Ohlone people. And I'm going to invite Anine, Nihal, and Noor to share a little bit before we start about what Nakba means, Nakba commemoration, what it is, and what it means to them personally. Are we good to start with that?
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Niad, would you like to start, or should I go? I think you should go.
Okay, I'll go.
Okay.
The devastating impact of the Nakba 1948 on the nascent film industry's infrastructure led to a 2-decade hiatus. So from a film festival's point of view, it's important to keep investing in Nakba awareness, because for 70 years, the word wasn't even known to most people. And if this word isn't known, then they don't have any idea of what happened and how we, the Palestinians, ended up here, and here referring to myself, but in Amsterdam, but the diaspora, a lot of people just don't know about it. And so I think, especially since last year, I think it's been quite effective commemorating the Nakba, not only for ourselves, but also for awareness. And it's still the case in many cultures. It's been completely overshadowed by October 7th. And also as a daughter of Nakba survivors, I was raised with the knowledge of why I was separated from family members without having the words to explain it to peers, to teachers, to colleagues. Basically, because I wasn't really raised with the words to explain it to other people. And also because we were silenced. I mean, I was raised in one of the most Zionist countries in Europe. And even those who were not silenced were never met with the acceptance or encouragement to share what our families went through, in my case, in the Netherlands, when the Israeli state was declared. By chance, my father was quite prominent in the media. He was a spokesperson for Palestinians, and he was quite good at that. But on a personal level, I never was. But everyone in Europe knows the slogan "Never Again," but it was never meant for us. We grew up in the shadows of the Holocaust. I literally grew up right behind where one of the official commemorations is held on Remembrance Day in the Netherlands, in The Hague. Every year there's 2 minutes of silence, and during that same procession, everyone who turns on their television hears loud bells. I don't know what they're called. They're like the bells that like the clock. There's another name for it, but and well, we didn't even need to turn our television on for it. It was a stone's throw away from our backyard. So I was really raised with this. But the same committee that has been commemorating Remembrance Day all these years has been diversifying with victims of colonialism, slavery, and wars in many regions of the world. And this year they invited the PFFA, which is the Palestinian Film Festival Amsterdam, which I curate, to give Palestine a voice. We created a really nice program in collaboration with a venue and an organization. And however, Palestine was excluded from the commemoration speech. There was heavy security due to the protests, even though they were peaceful. And T-shirts, even with Free Palestine, were forbidden. I mean, I don't know who thinks of inviting a Palestinian to talk about freedom and empathy while they're shutting them up at the same time. And I'm still wiping the spit off my face, actually. But we decided to go ahead with the beautiful event the next day, which is Liberation Day in the Netherlands, because the venue that we collaborated with had nothing to do with this decision. And the people who bought tickets were the ones we're doing this for. We're doing it not for, we're not preaching to the choir, you know? And they loved it. And that's why I think it's really important to keep commemorating, even when you feel like the odds are against you, because they're not, they're just louder. And we showed the film _𝘬𝘁 by 𝘕𝘪𝘩, which was the opening film last year when 75 years of Nakba was the festival theme. And we foraged herbs, we served a beautiful meal, and 2 poets recited Mahmoud Darwish's poetry. And even though this wasn't, you know, on Nakba Day, it's really intertwined. And yeah, and that's pretty much why I think it's important.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nihal. And indeed, like you said, you are here also as the curator and co-founder of the Palestinian Film Festival Amsterdam. Yes, Anine, did you want to share?
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Nihal.
Thank you. Thank you.
I just, you know, I'm coming from, maybe I will just say where I grew up, because I think like Nakba and the experience with Nakba and the generation that went through Nakba is different for different Palestinians living in different place. I grew up in a Galilee, in a small village, and Nakba and 75 years and occupation, they were erased from my like childhood, right? Like I grew up in a situation and in a context that these even the memory, even the stories of the elders, right, was not like present or accessible in my childhood. Only like when I was like 18 and the second Intifada was my political education kind of a event in Palestine that I was able. So even like the erasure, like I cannot talk about Nakba without erasure, right? And about like killing, and I cannot like also think about it as a memory that we are like respecting and bringing for our like a new generation and youth, but it's something that is ongoing for 75 years, and it's going right now in the most horrifying ways that we could imagine. So Nakba is a present moment, and while we hold this present moment, our like enemies are celebrating their independence. So let's not forget that the oppression and the colonial power and forces, they are full force, right? And we cannot stop. So Nakba reminds me of like a reminder of like we cannot stop, right? They are organized, they are funded, they are financed, they are like equipped, like we need to go on. So that's where I am emotionally, at least.
Thank you for that. And for the audience, Anine is here as also the former director of the National Palestinian LGBT grassroots organization Al-Qaus. And you can find more information of the bios also in the chat. Anine also writes a lot about pinkwashing, speaks about pinkwashing, is an organizer and activist. And of course, you will learn more about their practice as they will speak. And then Noor is here as a film student and writer. And Noor, did you want to share about how Nakba is experienced for you?
First of all, I would like to, like before jumping into what the Nakba means exactly and how I think we should interpret the commemoration of the Nakba, I would like to kind of help people visualize where I come from, how I grew up. So I'm a child of diaspora. I was born and raised in Saudi Arabia, and then we moved back to Gaza, which where my family were displaced from in the 1948 during the Nakba. So I am a refugee in my own country. I was displaced within my own country, and then we had to obviously, people immigrated for many reasons, one of them being financial, to start a family, to be able to provide for their families. The Nakba, I think the way that we commemorate the Nakba is a bit problematic, I believe, because every year there's some sort of we're commemorating it as if it's something in the past, as if it's something that has happened, and it's not ongoing. It's not ongoing. It is ongoing, and it's, as Hanin said, we're seeing it right now in one of its most horrific forms. I mean, in history, it was documented in history that about 15 to 20,000 people were killed during the Nakba. And about 600 to 700,000 people were exiled, displaced, and removed from their villages. But obviously, history sometimes is not very specific in what it aligns in its books. But right now, if we kind of, use a scale to kind of understand exactly the gravity of everything happening right now, we are facing a genocide. And I come from Gaza. I've lived in Gaza. I've experienced the wars, but there has not been anything to this in this huge magnitude, to this huge extent, where we are seeing people being killed, and the ministry of Gaza, they're unable, they don't have the capability to keep up with the death toll, which makes us think, if we are in this present time, in this present age and time, and we have all these technologies and people, and we can't even get a specific death toll, then imagine how many people were killed in the 1948s that were brushed over, swept under the rug. So commemorating the Nakba right now on the 15th of May, it means that you are aware of the present status quo, that you are aware that we are still in an ongoing fight, and the Nakba is ongoing even if people are not being killed. The Nakba is ongoing as long as the occupation persists and remains in Palestine. And the Nakba is our life. It is part of our identity, and it will remain part of our identity even when Palestine is freed, because that is what shaped our ancestors. It shaped our livelihoods, and it shaped exactly who we are these days. So there is absolutely no way for you to separate a Palestinian from a Nakba, no matter how much they try to whitewash it, to remove that part of our identity, the most integral and the axis of our lives, which is our struggle, basically. So, yes.
Thank you, Noor. And we will hear more from you about the background that you gave a brief paraphrasing of. Anin, do you feel ready and able to take us?
I am debating how I'm gonna bring it more to the actual lived experience of what that mean to be queer Palestinian, or what that mean to the people like me who lived in that area, in that like movement, felt like, and keep it just with no discourse. Like I'm now like in a area of my period of my life that like I think too analytics and too political and too discoursey is something that really divided communities and came on the account of values, and I'm trying to be conscious with that in this talk. So thank you for this like opportunity. And while like thinking about this talk, and in a way I'm also involved now in some archival project for the Palestinian queer movement, trying to capture some kind of a story, right? And this story, it cannot be a story of one person. It's like the lived experience of so many people in so many different areas in Palestine. And I was thinking how much like Al-Qaws story, at least my organization, is also Palestine story and Palestinian story, and every element and every like political event that shaped and us as individuals, us as collective, us as Palestinian, as Palestinian queers, right? And maybe I will jump now more to more concrete things. Al-Qaws from the beginning adopted some kind of anti-colonial commitment, right? And stating basically from the first couple of like early years in 2000 that every time we go outside of our bubble, we understand that we cannot just be queers. It's either soldiers will stop us or will come to our like events, either like a big political events will not be let us meet, right? It's always like a daily kind of a struggle. And from these early stages, we adopted this anti-colonial thing. Like think even about that, like Al-Qaws started before they completed the apartheid wall, right? We had friends from Ramallah and Jerusalem coming relatively in an easier way, right? Like, so we know Jerusalem area, like the West Bank, even before the formation and the final kind of apartheid war. So we went through in a lot of like how Palestinians got depoliticized and politicized in a lot of like aspects. And later on, this kind of a, not later on, even from the beginning, this kind of a desire to be also queer and also reclaim or try to reclaim some kind of self-determination of like who we are as Palestinians, despite the differences, despite the different legal status, despite what I call colonial privilege that gives people like me some more mobility, some more financial opportunities, because I like live in a specific area in a specific colonial control. So these things were faced from the beginning in a lot of like invested and well-organized attempts to actually erase that, right? Because the Zionist entity back then, and even before the queer movement started to institutionalize itself, started to say from the beginning that we are queer friendly, right? Like as a Zionist entity, we give rights to our like queer soldiers, trans women are like serving in the army, and a lot of levels, right? And we from the beginning understood that this is some kind against us, right? But some way in the during organizing, we went a bit outside our community and started to lead a lot of like international campaigns against pinkwashing, right? And pinkwashing, and I will define it a bit, pinkwashing is the propaganda that Israel's use to promote itself as queer friendly, right? Progressive, democratic, human rights, everything I'm saying now, I want to laugh because we all witnessing how all of these things are collapsing in front of our eyes. And on the other side, how Palestinian society is actually suffering from this sickness that calls homophobia and transphobia, right? And this like kind of racist, dehumanizing things. With the years going on and we are building communities, we started to understand that the BDS campaigns and pinkwashing as a propaganda campaign not really capturing the reality, because from our meeting direct contact with youth, and the more we extended our visibility and outreach to more queer youth, we understood that basically pinkwashing is an direct violence on queer Palestinians, right? It's not a propaganda, it's not a rainbow poster that the foreign ministry, the Israeli foreign ministry are like publishing. It's not about the Tel Aviv Gay Film Festival and its boycott. It is about all of these things, but basically we are missing a big kind of opportunity to reframe pinkwashing as colonial violence, right? And not a propaganda. And I wanna maybe give really briefly why pinkwashing is colonial violence. It's not a PR campaign, right? And that's really good, because like understanding that pinkwashing is the symptom takes us back to the roots, right? It's settler colonialism, right? It's apartheid and military occupation all in one place. Pinkwashing is just the symptom of a bigger system. And basically the Zionist entity is like fragmenting and Palestinian society into subgroups and areas from the beginning, but also fragmenting Palestinians from their self, from their ability to self-determination, right? All of this psychological, personal, internal stuff. And I think pinkwashing works more on that level. And so pinkwashing basically practice violence on four ways. The first one is making queer Palestinian and Palestinian society to internalize homophobia and transphobia, right? Because the more this campaign is working, it's also reaching Palestinian society. And the more Palestinian society hears stories about Israel hugging a queer Palestinian and giving them citizenship, right? We create this image that Palestinian queers are foreigners, collaborators, love our occupier, right? All of these things, and reinforce some kind of homophobia and transphobia. And for Palestinian queers, that's like more isolation, more division between family and the individual and the collective, the neighborhood, and really stripping out all of your connection and social connection that the pinkwashing basically work on. So that destructive effect, in a way, bring feelings of hopelessness, right? Like, and gives Palestinian queers a narrow political imagination, right? That's all. Also, that brings me to the second point in how pinkwashing is disempowering framework, because if this is my reality, and if gender and sexual oppression are essential part of what we are as Palestinians, so there is no way to challenge it, right? There is no way queer Palestinian can basically be a radical agent of transformation for themselves. They cannot really change the reality. Instead, like pinkwashing tells queer Palestinian, you are a victim. And not only you're victim and powerless in a way, but your only hope is linked with your colonizer. And that brings me to the third point, which is pinkwashing erases colonial context, because in the story of pinkwashing, there is pink doors in the apartheid world that queer Palestinians know that they can just step and cross colonial borders, right? And I think this part is the most ugly part, because like we are now witnessing how Israel is making in only 7 months refugees for the 8th time in 7 months, right? Like it's a refugee making machine, the Zionist entity, and how they dare to basically, and how also Western audience and LGBT groups around the world will collaborate with that this refugee making machine is basically claimed that they're giving some refugee to Palestinian queers, as if they are like, can be like stripped from their Palestinian identity or status. And that's for me is like really a cruel violence kind of rooted in the pinkwashing. And the last one, and I think it's building on that like last point, that pinkwashing erases us, erases queer Palestinians, queer Palestinian movement, erases progressive forces. They basically tell the stories that there is no Al-Qaus, there is no Aswad, there is no amazing artist, queer artist, Palestinian all over the world, right? There is no one. And because they know that we would be our like real enemy, right? And it's really, and like one last thing, and I will like finish here. And I think that if it's not about erasure, complete erasure, there is a big campaign that was adopted also internally, unfortunately, that because if Al-Qaus exists, so we need to find something wrong, right? So being anti-colonial was used against us, right? It's in a really interesting way about like reverse pinkwashing, right? So you are anti-colonial, meaning in that narrative, you don't care about the queers, you don't help youth. Everyone that will receive a request from queer Palestinian, Al-Qaus didn't do anything, right? And it's in a way, it's fragmented the queer Palestinian movement that at least working inside Palestine, in historical Palestine, about are we too colonial? Are we not caring about the Palestinian queers, right? And it started to be internalized to be a political kind of division. So I will stop here. Just like I try to use kind of pinkwashing to like shed lights on some kind of experiences that related to colonial context and also queer organizing, and how this is meeting each other, and how we could use settler colonialism basically to adapt that, and that will give us bring us closer to connect sexual and gender politics and struggle to the broader struggle of liberation. So I will stop here. I'm excited to hear my comrades' speeches too.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think we should definitely dive into that more, which we'll do after we invite 𝘠𝘀 to speak as well.
Should I do my presentation right now, or should I add on to it, or what am I supposed to?
No, do your presentation, and then we can all, if everybody speaks first, then we can all enter into conversation. Yeah.
Okay. There's not actually much for me to sort of imply here, because as I've stated before, and as has everyone seen, I'm still an aspiring filmmaker. I'm someone who is trying to put themselves on the field. I'm still a work in progress. I think everyone is a work in progress, but in the conventional meaning, when we say work in progress, it means that the person is still, they're still not fully mature, yada yada yada. So I'm a filmmaker and aspiring filmmaker, and my field, or the work that I am currently focusing on the most is, how do I bring the Palestinian identity, and even queer Palestinian identity, how do I bring it to life in a way that could be accepted, not necessarily accepted, but in a way that could be consumed by the public. And at the same time, it gives people the space to be able to connect and to also relate to the story and relate to the narration. So as someone who has grown up and known about my queer identity since I was very young, which is not common at all for someone in Palestine. I've known about it since I was, I would say, the first time that I came out to an online friend when I was about 13 years old. You come from a community that is both within Palestine and within the entire Arab world. You are indoctrinated to believe certain beliefs, to believe that you are one thing and not the other, and that there's no space for you to explore the other chances. There's no space for you to actually define yourself by what you actually want and what you actually are. And for me, growing up, I started getting more into politics. I started getting more into cinema, and it became, to me, in my head, I was always like, how do I combine all of these identities, and how do I bring it to life through art? How do I integrate it into my craft as someone who is still aspiring and who's still working onto it? Right now, obviously, I'm studying, and something that I'm aiming for, truly want to do, is I want to break a certain stigma that we have in the industry, which I've been kind of making my entrance into the cinematic world and the industry, and I've realized just how ugly the rhetoric is towards Palestinians, specifically queer Palestinians. You learn that the spaces that they have defined in the cinematic world are all taken, and in order for you to be included, you need to either push someone off a chair, or you need to just wait for them to die off, I suppose. And in my head, I've always been thinking, what kind of alternative do we have for us to be the spokesperson of ourselves, for us to be the representatives of ourselves, and at the same time perform and be able to do the craft, which is still a very difficult enigma for me, because if you want to work independent, if you want to be someone who is aiming for independent films, and you want to direct something that is aside from Hollywood, away from all the toxicity of, all these industries, it is really difficult for you to find funds. It's really difficult for you to find an audience that is going to sustain the support for you in the future. So in my head, I'm trying to kind of like muster all of these thoughts and bring myself onto the podium and be able to say, these filmmakers like us, or people who work and write and produce and direct films, and also do not want to be associated with those in power, with those who have dictated the language that we use, the tongue that we use every single time we go up on a stage. They give us, they give us the ready. They give us the statement ready, and you should say this, you should not say that. There should be a world where violence is not, the answer to violence is not silenced. And it should also exist in art. It should also exist in cinema. It should exist in every craft. And right now, as a student, as someone who's working on always feeding and flourishing and creating more craft that kind of bottles up my entire identity, it's really difficult because, as I said, there's always that barrier between you and your art. It's like I want to execute that art, but I don't have the means for it. The means for it are always, you don't have the entire funding, or you don't have a budget, you don't have a camera crew. So it comes to you as, a barrier between you and that art that you really aspire to become, that craftsman that you really aspire to become. And not only that, but, as a Palestinian, you may face a lot of difficulties in finding support in your art, in your cinema, in your writing. But if we, per se, you have stepped, or you've overcome that barrier, you've overcome that difficulty, now they have to know that you're also queer, which creates another obstacle. It's like, how do I communicate that? And in my work, I am someone who's kind of just, I write, I share my writings, and in my head, I'm just saying, I want to create my community, and through my community, it will kind of extend, and it will create a butterfly effect where all the branches will kind of intertwine, and this person knows this person, and through that, you can create community. And with community, that sort of sets an outlet. It sets a platform for you to share your story, to share your art and your craft. So that's pretty much what I'm doing as, a student and as an aspiring filmmaker, screenwriter, is I'm just, I'm right now, they say go with the flow, but I'm not really going with the flow. I'm very stressed. I'm always clenched as hell, but especially right now with the genocide going on and everything, it's been kind of like a barrier between me and myself. I really don't know how I'm gonna, put myself together, put the pieces together. How do I focus on the fact that I have family who are being killed, and at the same time, I have a life to sustain, because they also need me, because if I'm completely decrepit, then there's no me to help them. So there is, I'm probably the youngest amongst you all, and I think that, there's a lot for me to learn from everyone. So I'm just right now, what I'm trying to do, what my work really focuses on, is community, and trying as best as I can not to filter anything, because there is absolutely nothing wrong, and absolutely nothing to be ashamed of, and nothing to be scared of, because we're queer and we're Palestinian, and there should not be in any way dictation for the way that you express yourself as a Palestinian, as a queer Palestinian. And as also Haneen had mentioned, that, you know, there's this really, especially on social media, it's a really scary place. I find that it's really hard for me to connect myself, to connect my, you know, the different aspects of myself, cinema, queerness, Palestinian. And there's always like from the cinema community, maybe they don't like that you're queer, or maybe that they don't like that you're Palestinian. From the queer community, maybe they don't like that you're Palestinian, or maybe they don't like that you're creating Palestinian film. From the Palestinian community, obviously, we grew up, we were indoctrinated to believe that queerness is a wrong thing. Palestinian people, they're probably not going to like that you're queer, or, you know, they might not like that you are you're a filmmaker, a screenwriter. So there's always that sort of, you know, battle that you're going through. It's like a triangle that you're just walking through, and you're like, you just have to close your ears, have to create your craft. And there's always going to be people who are walking against you. They're walking in the other direction. And the point here is to always have the community behind you, and the craft that you create should be representative of you. It should not be, as now we all see, it's just commercial and marketing, and I'm fully against that. So I think that's all I'm aiming for, is that I be authentic, I be Palestinian, and I perform my arts, and I can be the filmmaker, the screenwriter that I want to be.
No,
So
can I
yeah.
ask you a follow-up question before we go to Nihal? I was wondering, when you were speaking, right, you're thinking about craft, and you're thinking about audience and the kind of materiality of filmmaking, like how does one get funds when these identity markers have to be presented in one particular way. And I was just wondering if you wanted to speak a little bit about the kind of queer Palestinian form that you're envisioning. I know, for example, there's a filmmaker here in the room, 𝘕𝘰𝘶, who is thinking about what it means to be a queer asylum seeker, and how to not create a kind of linear representational story of saying like, oh, look at these poor, you know, queer asylum seekers, and then they flourish when they get to Europe, right? So there's all of these different ways of living that are often not represented because of a kind of identity discourse that is required in form. Which leads also to linear filmmaking, etc. And I'm sure Nihal also, as a curator of a film festival, right, has a lot to say about this. But I just wanted, before we go to Nihal, I just wanted to ask you if you wanted to say something about your particular queer Palestinian form.
So, I mean, obviously for us in Palestine, there's no way that we can erase the fact that, you know, as queer people, we do go through very evident discrimination from our own people. But I think that it's been highlighted a little too much. So I think my stories that I want to represent to the world, I think they are more specific to the self, to the individual, where it does not focus too much on calamity and on the violence that we face. Because if we have any cinema or film enjoyers here, then you are probably aware of the fact that we have this sort of framework or pattern when it comes to queer cinema, where there's always some sort of calamity, there's always some sort of struggle that ends up with a very disrupting ending, or ends up with a very traumatizing storyline. And as much as it is necessary to share those stories, I think that there also needs to be those stories that humanize queer people. And that, for me, that is also what I would like to work on as a queer Palestinian. One more thing is that I think that, you know, as you've mentioned, there are always those stories about, Muhammad left Afghanistan. He was a queer guy. He was about to be killed. And then he went to Sweden. And then he lived his life. He was going from club to club, and he was partying, and he was almost Swedish. Like, this is the kind of storylines that we're presented with, and I won't lie, it sometimes happens, but there's too much of it that it shows how evidently they're trying to just staple some sort of propaganda, some sort of pattern that people memorize and people understand. And there's a scheme here that they're trying to fit into the queer cinematic world, where, you know, these Middle Eastern or people from I don't like this term, but the global South, where they come and they immigrate and they start a better life. And that's true, like, because, you know, distancing yourself from family sometimes is a good thing. But the thing is, there's too much focus, and it's not for the right reasons. These stories are not made to actually show the struggle of queer people. It's more to vilify and villainize the people living in the Middle East, when we all know for a fact that one of the largest symptoms of colonialism, or one of the large side effects of colonialism, was homophobia. It was not that evident before colonialism. So I think, in my opinion, we need more cinema that shows more on the personal plane, where, you know, a queer person, how do they live? What kind of tea do they drink in the morning? What does a queer Palestinian think about during their day? What do they write in their diary? It's all these simple things that we miss, that we actually see in other people and identities cinema that we do not see for other, you know, groups of people, such as queer Palestinians. And that is particularly what I'm looking for.
Thank you so much, Noor. Nihal.
Thank you, Noor and Haneen, for your beautiful talk. And all these things came up that I tried to write down so we can talk about it later. So that was really inspiring. So I was invited to share my organizational and creative practice as a way to establish better understanding of the ongoing anti-colonial, artistic, and activist organizing for Free Palestine. Growing up as a Palestinian in the Netherlands, which was probably, as I mentioned before, the most Zionist country in Europe in the 70s and 80s, and as the only daughter in a male-dominated household, I always identified with the other, unconventional cultures, venues, music, film, people, food. And this is probably what led me to curate the PFFA, which was founded in 2015. And it emerged from actually from a protest, from a nonprofit community action fueled by an urge to create a grassroots platform that would address the exclusion of Palestinian directors from Palestinian film programs in the Netherlands. Some, like, the festival's roots were against the dominance of documentaries shot by activists, including some Israelis, with all well-intended, but often without prior film experience. And as important as it is to document the injustices that are carried out by the Israeli military, many films at these festivals were often reportages that carried political content, but limited the opportunities for Palestinian directors to share their narratives. So yeah, there was a bit of a colonialist kind of feel to these festivals that were called Palestinian festivals. And in response, I envisioned an inclusive platform that would showcase a diversity of genres, including drama, features, shorts, animations, documentaries, presented by both established and emerging Palestinian directors. So we need to talk, Noor. The PFFA is it's involved into an intersectional platform for Palestinian cinema, with a mission to showcase there is these days a rich diversity of storytelling, addressing historical challenges as well, and the continuous exploration of the cinematic narratives from the Palestinian perspective. So in my mission to be inclusive, I'm actually also being exclusive, because 95% of the time it's Palestinian directors that we screen films by, and because they didn't I didn't feel like they were getting a fair chance at Palestinian film festivals. So the emergence in independent filmmaking in the 2010s with digital facilities, they empowered Palestinian directors to become more self-sufficient. And since then, you've been hearing more from Palestinian filmmakers. And this era, it witnessed the resurgence of Palestinian directors, and they're gaining more autonomy and worldwide recognition at major international film festivals. I'm not sure if you can hear my cat. He's meowing. My apologies. He always needs attention when I'm talking. Online streaming platforms also had an increase in Palestinian film festivals to globally further to expand their reach. And during the third edition in 2023, the PFFA commemorated 75 years of Al-Nakba. And this year, the Nakba theme, it's going to be highlighted as well. And it's going to be extended with films from Gaza. We're still creating the program. But before I get into the fourth edition, which is focused on queer Palestinian cinema, I'd like to mention that we've held a few fringe events this year, many of them in collaboration with this lovely spot called Ventilator Cinema. And since I'm a cook, I often do food and film events. And BDS in the Netherlands also regularly coordinates events with film. And last year on Nakba Day, they held a cinema program with a lot of queer shorts. And I have the titles here if you want to hear them later. And a few months later, I was contacted by them asking if I'd like to participate in the Queer Cinema for Palestine Festival. And it's a global anti-pinkwashing festival. And this was the first time it took place in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam, actually. And Roberto Filippo, curated it. And it's a compilation of shorts called the Fashion Program. And through this collaboration, I met some wonderful people who I'm working with now. Sarah is one of them. She's a program producer at the festival this year. And I've also got the list of films. So I can't really take credit for much of that festival because Roberto did most of the work and the filmmakers, obviously, but it was a great way to help facilitate this year's theme. And so the fourth edition is going to take place in October. It's still in development. So it's focusing on dissident voices and featuring an extensive program and talks on queer Palestinian cinema. And it was inspired by a filmmaker, Palestinian queer filmmaker based in Montreal called Razana Salah. And she will be curating a program within the festival program, including works by and in conversation with Indigenous queer directors. And I'll name them: Charlene Bambot, Sami Al-Salamouni, and 𝘕𝘰𝘧𝘰𝘳. And it will be called Solidarity from Turtle Island to Palestine, which is based on a film in solidarity by Charlene. And what really inspired me is a film that Razan made in 2017. It's called Your Father Was Born 100 Years Old, and So Was the Nakba. And it's about a Palestinian grandmother who returns to her hometown, Haifa, which is also where my parents are from, through Google Maps Street View. And it's the only way she can see Palestine. And it's like a doc fiction. It's a reconstruction, a recollection of the memory of returning to Haifa. It's like an imaginary memory. And Razan is imagining her grandmother was able to return to Haifa when she was still alive. And you should see it. It's incredible. And so we're gonna also show her new film, A Stone's Throw. It's gonna premiere here. And also another film by her called Canada Park, and Solidarity from Turtle Island to Palestine, and Dislocation Blues by 𝘕𝘰𝘧𝘰𝘳. And so there's a film by Charlene called Both Instrument and Sound that I'm really bad with titles, so I have to read them, sorry. Otherwise I'll make a mistake. Which is also going to have its 39 minutes. It's also going to have its premiere. And Cowboy by Sam. That's 15 minutes from 1973. So there's going to be a compilation. I can't tell you about all the films yet because one of them isn't done yet, and we're still creating the program. But this was already planned months ago, and I'm really excited about it because I just think that right now there are enough queer Palestinian filmmakers that if you have a segment, it's not forced, and it's not like I think maybe like someone who doesn't like the idea would say, oh, you're tokenizing something that's not accepted in Palestinian society. And actually one of the most famous Palestinian directors actually made her big breakthrough. I don't know how she identifies, if she's bi, or at that time she was with a woman, and she made a really big breakthrough. This is more than 10 years ago. So I think that, as Noor was saying, we do have a lot of problems in our society, but we shouldn't forget that, not everybody is the same, and that there's obviously, those of us who are living in the West or in the United States, or we do have certain privileges. But I think that for now, I think it's really important that we accentuate this, if that makes any sense. What else did I want to say about this? Sorry, it's in my notes. There was something I wanted to say about, oh yeah. So about pinkwashing, I actually discovered what it was when I was in Jerusalem. I think it was in 2005. I don't know how long I've been talking. Let me know if I'm going on too long. But there was a Jerusalem Pride then, and I remember being in Jerusalem and just reading so many, basically what Noor and Haneen were saying, just basically seeing how this abuse was being instilled in, for instance, I would see a lot of Palestinians, because I was also in Ramallah a lot, traveling to Jerusalem to go to queer bars. And there was this kind of facade of it being accepted. But in these queer bars, you also had people who were reservists as soldiers. There was no real coexistence. It's always been a facade. And I think the pinkwashing then just kind of really got instilled in me, and how I've just never really seen a relationship between even well-meaning activists in Israel and in Palestine, where the power struggle is equal, if that makes any sense. And there was actually a documentary made about this, and I think, I don't remember the title, but I think that the person who was saved and was brought to Tel Aviv ended up in Sweden, and they weren't very happy about it. But so I was going to also say something about queer hangouts. This has nothing to do with the festival, actually. They really offered me a safe space when I was traveling as a young woman in the 80s and 90s. And I remember like I would go to Spain or France or the United States. And one thing that always kind of bothered me was that they were not always inclusive. Like some places they were the only places where people would be, sympathetic towards Palestine. But now it's really changing. Now for instance, there's this place called Barbario in Amsterdam, which is, they even closed for a few days in solidarity with Palestine. I think a lot of queer hangouts in Europe are just not, because they're, in the past, I think they've been more divisive. And right now, I think as a Palestinian, there's just so much more intersectionality. And I think that's really important. And for that, I think that I will end my talk.
Thank you so much, Nihal.
Thank you.
I wanted to say something. Muja asked in the group chat. Pardon. No, I don't know what your pronouns are. I'm sorry, Muja. Or is it they, them? I'm not really sure. They asked for
They, them. Yeah.
Down.
Okay, okay, they, them. So they asked about Omar to Haneen. If how is Omar doing? So Omar was detained, and I believe that they're a friend of mine as well. They were detained, and they're queer activists in Palestine. They're now in the Israeli detention, Israeli jails. So do we have any news from Omar, if there's anything that any like updates or anything?
Yeah, actually, Haneen updated me about their situation.
Yeah, just I don't feel that much. I like answered in the private chat, so I was like a bit
okay.
surprised about your public question, like because I didn't talk with Omar before or after, so but he's still in detention and with another 8,000 people that were picked up and kidnapped in the last couple of months. So let's also focus on like the political framework and not the queer kind of framework. I think that's why I like jumped. It's not like about queer activism. It's about being anti-colonial activist in Palestine. So thank you for asking, and sorry for my discomfort. It's just
no, it's okay, because I also had the idea that Omar was detained for being a queer activist, and there was no like not much talk was going on even from my friends who are also friends of Omar. And I was just kind of I was scared to ask about it online. You know, it's a sensitive topic. It could put people in danger, so I kind of drew myself back. But now that I saw Muja, right, I was like, okay, let's just ask it. So
no problem, and I'm willing to have conversation privately too on my WhatsApp.
Okay, sure.
Would love to and طمن الناس عن عمر. It's like
ولا يهمك.
I think maybe actually, I mean, unless there's questions, you can ask each other questions. We can invite questions in from the audience right now. But I think actually to that last bit, what you were saying, right? Like, let's not just focus on it being a queer activist in this case, but an anti-colonial activist. I wondered, Haneen, if you wanted to say something more about that, how you are approaching this, and also in the way in which the sort of definition of queer, like in the way that you were talking about pinkwashing, right? How there are ways, how you have perceived ways of formulating, living, and existing queer that are not in some sense a direct defensiveness or not in direct response to the way that pinkwashing then formulates queerness. Does this make sense? So you're talking about also like not talking about queer identity, but about queer strategy, queer politics. Yeah.
I think we are in a moment now that I think solidarity and global solidarity is like a big, you know, it's a big force, and it will always for me stay with a lot of questions, and I want to zoom into queer solidarity, right? Like that happening in the last couple of months. I felt a lot of times that we are using the queer identity as kind of a reverse pinkwashing, if I may dare to say that, in a way like emphasizing our queer identity, or like pinkwashing even more progressive pinkwashing because we are activists, right? I lived as a queer anti-colonial activist in Palestine, and still I'm just like here for a couple of months in South Africa, based in South Africa, but I never left Palestine in my life. Like I didn't grow up outside of Palestine, never lived out of Palestine. So it felt for me like identity politics. It just showed us this period that identity politics is enough. Like I think we can all agree how it's useless, how it's just really strip people from their identities and soul and heart, really fragmenting them from collectives. And I think that's a big take for me in the last couple of months. I also saw how much we we don't like, in a way, a lot of global queer solidarity. I don't know if you saw this video, but this video about queer international activists to respond to accusation of Israelis to them that they are like homophobic, like they are surrounding themselves of homophobic Hamas and Egyptian activists, and they will be killed, right? So they made a video presenting themselves as queer, and going and having conversation with Palestinians and Egyptian, probably they are working in Egypt somewhere, and how we were not killed, right? I found it really humiliating and like really embarrassing, this kind of like solidarity of like, it's kind of using the same language of our like colonizer in a way. And I think we need to, we don't need to reroute our activism and solidarity through pinkwashing and even Zionism. We have now direct kind of relationships and dynamic that we could just really utilize to us as communities in deep and real solidarity. So yes, that's like I think the whole queer discourse, Noor, it came from a lot of care, because people, I think, thought if we emphasize the queer activism, that will bring more attention. But specifically, and I would feel more empathy toward that in different periods. But now that literally 8,000 people, young people, Birzeit University students, leaders, activists were really kidnapped from their houses since October 7th. I think that's a moment that I think we should just expand how we see these hostages, right? And people who were kidnapped from their families and from their like warm bed at night. But it's young women, young activists, queers, non-queers, elderlies, and it's that's where I'm coming from emotionally. And I think I love this, that we have some kind of it's me, I'm projecting out on the conversation because I'm crossing my 45 now, right? This kind of intergenerational conversation, right? Like and Noor, about like really bringing, like figuring out what that film that can tell that story and what that story is and who we are, right? And I think just maybe the trap of representation, right? Like the trap of representation, because we are like a small group and like a really like be creative, fly, dream. There is no one film that will capture this like big stories, as there is no one Palestinian film will capture the Palestinian story. And like I think keep creating and really telling the stories and archiving our history and retelling it is just the way to go. And we are like erasure is the biggest, most like harmful kind of thing that's happening to us, and we need to continue.
Yeah, beautifully said.
Yeah, I wanted to like emphasize specifically on the identity politics discourse, which has caused immense amounts of harm to the Palestinian movement, specifically on social media outlets like Twitter and Instagram, where people are like, Palestine is a queer cause. Palestine is a disability cause. Palestine is an what do they call it? An ecological cause. It's like, we understand these sections, we understand that there are numerous aspects and facades of the Palestinian cause, but if it takes you to personally identify with a movement or to personally identify with victims of genocide, for you to actually support the victims, for you actually to say no to genocide, then you are not actually pure about your politics, and you are not saying no to genocide because you actually think that genocide is bad. It's come to a point where you're like, genocide is bad, queer people also die, and then you're like, oh, okay, now let's support them. This is where it got to me. Like, for me as a Palestinian, someone who lives in Gaza, I faced homophobia in Gaza, and I know what it's like. I know what, and it's not fun. But where was this actual, where was this authentic activism where you're standing for the Palestinian people against their occupier, and at the same time you understand that domestically, interpersonally, they're going through, they're struggling just like any other nation in the world. Perhaps maybe we have to emphasize that, you know, yes, in the 𝘕𝘪 region, in Arab world, yes, we do face difficult homophobia, difficult transphobia. But the emphasis right now that is happening, that we see in on tweets talking about, oh, you're queer and you support the Palestinian cause, they would throw you off a building, they would execute you, they would behead you. One, if you think that in order for you to say no to genocide, to a mass extermination that is being systemically and frantically, it's being globally manufactured, if you're not willing to say no to that genocide just because it's a genocide, and the one who is operating the genocide is the oppressor on the oppressed, and it's been happening for multiple years in different faces, in different forms, if it takes you to say no to that genocide, knowing that there are queer people in that genocide, then you are absolutely not a good person. Your politics are not actually anti-genocide. They're not anti-colonialist. They're not in any way they're not in any way revolutionary. They're selective, and you are picking you are only picking things to support things that are in the same intersection that you stand in. If that cause does not in any way meet in your intersection, then you're not going to support it. Then that means that you are not revolutionary, you're not a radical, you're not a leftist, you're not a socialist, whatever namings we have nowadays. And we've seen such a huge focus on the identity politics, specifically on Twitter, where people are like, if you are this, then you should support Palestine. If you are that identity, then you should support Palestine. This is not how our politics work. This is not how a genocide is being operated. It is operated because a group of people, nationally, ethnically, they are facing ethnic cleansing. They are facing being fully wiped out from their own nation. If it takes you to hear, oh, there are queer people, oh, there are people of race X, Y, Z, I think that genuinely shows to us just how individualistic people are, and how they always seek to see something that is familiar to them so they can actually support the cause. And that's all I have to say.
May I say something?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I hear you, Noor. I think that also if you're living abroad in a country like where I live, and you hear that a lot, that oh, those Muslims or those Arabs or those Palestinians, they're also homophobic, and the only way a queer person will survive is if they leave. You know, it's the reason I know Simon is because during the IDFA, the International Documentary Festival, what are they called? The Queer Choir for Palestine? Yeah, so there were a bunch of events that got well, long story short, a bunch of events got or films got canceled in solidarity for Palestine because of the way the festival treated a few people. And Simon decided not to cancel, but brought a choir that sang Free Palestine. So I think on some levels, like the solidarity from certain groups really does, it makes you feel not so alone, if I'm making any sense.
Of course, I mean, that's a little bit not, outside my point, because obviously, I'm
I know.
queer. And when the genocide first started, I was yelling I felt like I was yelling into an empty chamber onto my queer community. And it's sad that we had to, at some point we were like posting pictures of queering the map, and we had to prove that, okay, queer people also exist in Palestine. And that was when people actually started caring. And that, to me, that is humiliating, and that dehumanizes me. I'm queer and I'm Palestinian as well, but do you need proof that there are other queer Palestinians for you as a queer person to support the cause? No, you don't need it. It's enough for you to know that Palestinians are facing a genocide right now in order for you to be, actively on the field, and in order for you to participate in saying no to the system and to the people in power who are facilitating this genocide. So yes, I understand. I definitely, it feels so good that I have so many queer friends who are, they're wholeheartedly queer, they're wholeheartedly pro-Palestine. But there are some others who I would say I know, but are not close friends, where it just, the first few weeks I was like posting videos and pictures of death, and there was no sound. And then people on Twitter started posting Queer the Map and, things related to Queer Palestine. And it just felt to me that they were waiting for something that they could relate to in order for them to, to join the movement, to join the cause, which was definitely dehumanizing for me, And
Yeah,
I know so many Palestinians who are on the same page. Like every single queer Palestinian that I know is on the same page. They're like, I feel like they're using my identity right now. I feel like I'm some sort of token for them, and we don't want that. So, yeah.
I think
Yeah,
sorry, Nihal.
No, I just wanted to say I experienced that on so many levels. And there was this one moment where you see like a lot of people feel like they got the green light, where they feel like they allow themselves to be a little outspoken or to share stories, and it's like kind of the same at the same time. And by then you've kind of lost faith. Yeah. And may I say one more thing? I don't want to mention the name of the place, but even the whole colonialist, the facade, it's still there, because I wanted to work with, I was looking for venues, and we've been, a lot of venues have welcomed us with open arms, but there was one in particular that was like, yeah, but if we can't offer a platform to an Israeli festival, then yeah, we're thinking about whether we can offer it to you. And I was like, why? And they were like, well, because we can't guarantee the safety of our audience for the Israeli festival. And this Israeli festival it's gone now, but they had on their website, we stand with Israel. And I was like, yeah, but I'm not the one here who's condoning violence and a genocide, and I don't support a state that is ethnically cleansing people. And that the festival attracts peaceful audiences, and I don't think that I find it a bit ridiculous that inviting a Palestinian festival has to depend on whether you invite an Israeli festival. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense, and that's a very colonialist attitude. So anyway, we've got enough venues. So, but yeah, that was very kind of disorienting.
I think something in what you just shared also, and when you were talking about queer hanging out spots as you were traveling, right, points to the potential of it being spatial and not identitarian. Right. So it's when you mentioned it, I was thinking, or the documentary film festival in Amsterdam, I was thinking about how it's never been about gathering as queer artists. It was never about individual identities. It's about a spatial conglomeration, just as this kind of Through the Window has been over the 4 or 5 years that we've been doing this, right? That under the banner of queer, which is such a ridiculous banner in and of itself, because it homogenizes this idea of identity, there it becomes a space where Noor can meet Nihal, and maybe there's a moment where at the Palestinian Film Festival Amsterdam, we will be able to see Noor's film, and also where Muja can ask about a person they know about, and maybe Hanin and Muja can be in touch later on. Right. So, and that is obviously not about being queer.
No, not at all. And I mean, I tend to ramble a bit, but you're right. It's spatial. Yeah, good word.
I want to, we have to wrap up soon. But I do want to give people a chance in the audience. I know that there's a lot of people here who are working on similar questions and towards similar futures free from colonization. So I just want to give people a moment if they want to drop their question. If Hanin, Nihal, Noor, if you want to say anything as a last remark, but also just that people can be in touch in case there's questions, lingering questions that need to be addressed as we are going out into our night and into our day here.
I think people can open their mics. We should probably say that. If they want to open their mics, that's okay, right? Or maybe they can write in the chat if they're, you know, if you're shy or anything. So both works. I'm guessing there are no questions right now. So there was something that I wanted to say, and I'm trying to gather my thoughts right now. I think you know, there's this specifically on social media, we see people always talking about how they care for queer Palestinians and how they would fight for us Palestinians. And I think it's fair to say that with the liberation of Palestine, there will come also the liberation of us as Palestinians within our own selves. There has to come, you know, that there's always, like, you know, steps to freeing and to liberating ourselves. And liberating Palestine is not going to be just one thing and it's going to, you know, happen at once. And people seem to always have that, you know, thought, okay, what about the ultra-Islamism in Palestine? What about the homophobia? What about this and that? And it's just like, leave it to the Palestinians, because we have bigger fish to fry right now. We have a genocide. And I find it significantly patronizing when someone comes up to me and asks me about these things when I have family members who were killed in Gaza. I am okay, I'm queer and it's a very important part of my identity. But it seems like there is this sort of barrier between how people actually want to see Palestinians and how we really are. My identity should not be something that you should think about right now, because there is a death camp where people are not being able to go in and out of it, where people are being killed en masse, and the person that you're talking in front, the person in front of you you're talking to is also subject of that genocide because they have family members. They have family members, and it doesn't take you to have family members to see for a fact that this is something, you know, it should be the axis right now in our social circles. It's just, it seems so difficult sometimes to these days to socialize, to actually talk to people or engage with anyone socially, because that sort of perception is missing. And I don't want to toss, I mean, I'm queer, I'm proud, but I don't want to talk about the intersectionality of queerness and Palestinianhood right now, when I'm scared of looking at my phone to see that I have a family member who was killed.
So,
no questions coming in, just thank yous and hearts. Before we close here today, Nihal and Hanin, do you want to say anything before we leave?
It's hard to say anything after what Noor shared, but maybe just a quick note about homophobia. And as a as maybe we need to resist the framework that's called homophobia, because it's a bit naive to even isolate homophobia and with other like violence that we know that could like colonized communities have, like domestic violence and like patriarchal violence and colonial violence. And we know from a lot of like research that how they're so intertwined that you cannot say when patriarchy started and colonialism violence ends, right? It's so complex. So I would like offer also to resist. It's not about if Palestine has homophobia or transphobia or not. It's about, is homophobia really could describe and handle and carry the complexity of violence created by the colonial context historically, in the present moment, and in the future. And I think that's my take about like all of the Western hegemony kind of identity politics, homophobia coming out, visibility, and all of these terms that we know from organizing 20 years in Palestine, that they don't work. They don't give answers. They don't give comfort. They don't give analysis. They just a symptom of the same kind of imperial colonial kind of context we live in.
Thank you for that. I wholeheartedly agree. I don't know if I'm sending out the right message in the right time. So, but you put it out nicely.
Yeah. I think that was a beautiful closing thought, unless you want to say something, Simon.
No, I think we can leave it at that. I think what really resonates for me in the last things that were said is that as Through the Window, we never invite, right? We never ask like, how is it to be queer? Or how do you do this as a queer artist? It's precisely because there's a kind of baseline of queerness, whatever the fuck that means, and that can mean something different in each moment. That then this question becomes, okay, so what questions do come forward? And what formulations of liberation do come forward? With that, I hope you will all stay in touch. I hope that the people who were here found something in this virtual space of coming together. And I would love to thank Nihal and Haneen and Noor for their amazing contributions and for their trust also to be in this virtual space with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And also thank you, Haneen and Noor. You spoke so well. I really learned a lot from you. Thank you.